Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1998 war film, The Thin Red Line. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I want to give a special shout out to John for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description down below, and I'll try to get to it as soon as I possibly can. Now, The Thin Red Line is a film that, when it came out in 1998, it was kind of overshadowed by another war film that got a lot of acclaim and definitely got more box office success in Saving Private Ryan. And there are quite a few people who prefer this over Saving Private Ryan, and in some ways, I can understand why. Uh, and even though I wasn't ultimately as big on Saving Private Ryan as other people were, I still would say I like that film a bit more than this. This is a movie that definitely has some serious highlights. I think this film has some of the most visually impressive and stunning direction and cinematography when it comes to the genre of war films. I think it's right up there with work like 1917, for instance. And it does feature some really strong and standout performances by certain members of the cast. But other than some technical merits and a really just spectacular score by Hans Zimmer, I don't really feel this film is as consistently strong or as good as it could have been. It meanders around way too much when it comes to the narrative, to the point where it really hurts the film when it comes to its pacing. And it just makes it into a film where it's got some great things about it. It's got some nice looking shots. It's got some good war scenes when it decides to actually focus on the battle and war. But there's other stuff in this that is just, it just comes across as pretentious and nowhere near as weighty or as profound as Malick thinks that it is, or is trying to present the film to be. And I know for some people, me bringing that up is ridiculous to them, and to each their own. But I don't feel this film is as profound or as captivating as others feel that it is, because so much of it is just pontificating about themes and subtext that is really not that interesting to me. And in particular, the whole conversation about man versus nature is something that has been done to death. There have been a million other movies prior to this that have discussed that have opened up discussions about man versus nature, and have done it in ways that actually, to me, didn't necessarily detract from the entertainment value of the movie. And I understand maybe this isn't trying to be an entertaining, like, popcorn film. And I get that. And I think in some ways that is to the film's benefit, because it is something that really helps the film stand out from other films in the genre. But it's also to the film's detriment because it kind of spends a little too much of the running time with its head shoved up its ass, smelling its own farts. Now, the Thin Red Line is directed by Terence Malick, who, after a really long layoff when it comes to directing, he came back and decided to do this film. And there was a lot of hype for his return to direction with this movie. A lot of different actors, a lot of different people in Hollywood at the time really wanted to be a part of this, or were at least curious to see what Malick had up his sleeve. And I can see why. It is honestly really surprising and honestly pretty shocking that Terrence Malick, after such a incredibly long layoff, we're talking, I think it was like at least a couple decades or close to it, he didn't miss a beat. The direction in this is dynamic. It's full of energy and verve, and it's just very compelling to look at, and just visually just incredible. It's a great looking movie. The way that he shot the war scenes, the battle scenes, the sequences that are there, they're slick and stylish, but also really do a great job putting you into the action and really providing uh, a nice bit of adrenaline, which is what you need for that kind of battle sequence or series of scenes. And I feel that some of the more somber, some of the more emotional moments in the film, some of the scenes that are trying to really showcase the brutality and just the evil nature of war and of man are shot in ways that are very unflinching and definitely do hit you pretty hard. And it's a film that also has a certain beauty to it. There are some really just gorgeous looking shots in this, whether it's from the setting of the film, which takes place on this island, or the people who live on the island, the natives, and their interactions with uh, some of the soldiers who are deciding to stay there. A lot of the shots in this film are just really nice to look at, and it does show you that he's a consummate professional and that he really is one of the best and most finest filmmakers of his time. And he also gets the most out of his cast when it comes to the performances. I would say the performances in this are steady. You don't have a lot of uneven performances by any member or any part of the cast. And I honestly think, in large part, that's because of Terence Malick, who managed to just even things out and just get the best or the most consistent performance out of every member of his cast, right down to the guys who don't have as much screen time or don't have as much dialogue compared to other characters in the film. So yeah, just a really impressive film from a visual perspective. And Terrence Malick, I can't sing enough praises. I think his direction in this is just absolutely magnificent, and it is one of the few reasons why I still like this film despite my issues with it, because it's just such a grand spectacle of a movie to witness unfold before your eyes, just to see what Terrence Malick has up his sleeve when it comes to his movie making magic. Now, he wrote the film as well, and this is where I feel the film falters the most. This script is it's good. I don't think it's great though. It suffers from a lack of focus. And this happens a lot with some of these auteur filmmakers, some of these filmmakers who feel that they are kind of untouchable in some ways, like, oh, they're so above it all and they're so above everyone else in the industry that they can just pontificate and just drag things out, and it's profound, and it's really compelling writing. And I don't really feel that that was the case here with Malick's script. There's a lot of meandering, and there's too much meandering when it comes to the screenplay, and in large part it's due to the chosen structure that he picked for this narrative and for this script. This is one of those films that really is kind of a slog to sit through at times. You have like the first hour and a half of the movie that goes by and it feels like it's 2.5 hours already, and this is a movie that's already too lengthy in my opinion. It's nearly 3 hours. And when you really break it down, there really isn't enough there for it to be 3 hours, other than just a writer and director's excess. And what do I mean by that? It takes way too long to really build a central conflict. I'm sorry, the conflict of war itself is not enough because that's a given in a war film. You need an extra conflict other than just war. You need some kind of objective. And once you get to the point where, oh, you've got to take the bunker, and then after the bunker, we've got to take the entire hill, then you get an objective. You get a clear goal for the characters and for the film to uh, achieve or to follow a path to. Prior to that, there's just a lot of filler. A lot of, in my opinion, kind of half assed attempts to build character with some little snippets of character development for some of these characters in the form of flashbacks or narration. And you have the whole stuff in the beginning with the natives and the two military guys who went AWOL and are hanging around in what they consider to be paradise and kind of heaven on earth. And then they get a rude awakening when they get brought back to reality. And now they got to be a part of the war again. And there's also an issue with the script when it comes to there being way too many characters. I understand it's a war film and there's a lot of people that are a part of a battle in this kind of context. But that creates a problem where, yes, it makes sense when you look at it from a historical perspective and from a realistic perspective. But when it comes to a narrative, there's only so much you can do in terms of providing a good focus or a good amount of strength to multiple characters. When you throw in a dozen characters or more, then you start to really make things pretty convoluted and hard to follow at times, and really do provide a reason to not be as invested in the story. So yeah, too many characters, which creates too many focus points that don't necessarily fit together with one another. So this creates a very scattered, very kind of clunky uh, way that the narrative flows. So you have these moments where the film seems like it's focusing on this particular character, but then it shifts to focus on someone else, and then it shifts from there to some other character and their goal and their perspective and their objective, and it just becomes convoluted and kind of confusing at times. And then on top of that, you have these moments where the film has this narration from various different characters where they're supposedly saying something profound or something that is philosophical, or they're pontificating about something that ties into the film's theme or the film's subtext. And it just comes across as kind of laughable because of just how overwrought and just how pretentious these narration moments are. They don't feel very authentic. They honestly are kind of jarring because you'll get these narration moments and they're supposed to be from a particular character, and you don't necessarily buy that the character is speaking like that in this moment. So it becomes distracting. And if that doesn't really hurt the narrative enough and add to the fractured nature of it, you have these other sequences where it's got these flashbacks to this one soldier and his wife at home, and they're well shot, but when it comes to the writing, they just feel out of place, and it just makes things even more hard to follow. And yeah, it just adds to the meandering nature of the film's script. There's at least an hour of fluff to me personally that could have been trimmed entirely out of the screenplay and really would have helped the film immensely. Would have helped the pacing, would have helped the film resonate more strongly, because as it is, all of these deep thoughts about man versus nature and man's place in war and the reality of war and the psychological aspects of war and the price of war and all this other stuff, it's not really something that's that unique. It's not presented in a way that's particularly interesting or that involving. And it just becomes something that really does come across like Terrence Malick is just going around in circles, and that gets really tedious and it gets really tiresome going around in circles over and over again about these very common themes and this common subtext that you've seen done a million different times in a million other war films or a million other movies up until this point about the discussion of man versus nature and the battle of that of man and their fight against nature or their own human nature, and it's all stuff that, yeah, you've seen done before, and you've seen other films approach it in a way that's a little more interesting, definitely more cohesive, definitely more consistent, and doesn't come across as jarring and doesn't come across as meandering. So it's just one of those things. It does. It just feels like whenever it's trying to be deeper, whenever it's trying to say something profound, it just comes across to me like it's just going around in circles. Because all Malick does with this script when it comes to these deep thoughts is just say the same things, provide the same arguments, provide the same opinions with maybe just a few things changed here and there. And never really comes to a conclusion. Because when it comes to discussion of these themes and of the subtext, it's objective. It's not, it's because when it comes to a discussion of these themes and of the subtext, it's inherently subjective. There's no such thing as an objective viewpoint of man versus nature. So that's why you have just so many scenes that just feel like it's just spinning in circles because there's never really a conclusion. There's never really a clear, concise answer to any of it. And yeah, I feel you could have easily just cut out some of the characters, focus on a select group of characters. Let's say the characters that eventually take the bunker. Focus on them for the majority of the movie, with some little bits with their commanding officers or so on and so forth. Don't focus on the entire company as a whole. That's too ambitious, and that's too many characters, and it makes it too hard to follow. So just focus on a select group and provide the objective and the goal earlier on in the movie and make that the whole thing. Oh, we got to take the bunker, and then we've got to take the hill, and then you have stuff where the script will point out that it's never over, even though you think that you've won the day. You know, they're always going to have something else that they're going to want you to do next. The war never ends. And you can continue the anti war sentiments and all this other stuff, and it would still be rather effective and definitely something to me that would make a more compelling and a more worthwhile narrative, because so much of the script is just devoted to these pontifications and these moments where the film is just trying to have a discussion about things that just aren't nearly as interesting or as thought provoking as Malick thinks they are. And this is definitely not something that I would lay at the feet of the cast. This cast is great. The cast is also one of the elements of this film that I really like and I think is very top notch and very top of the line. Sean Penn as Sergeant Welsh, Adrian Brody as Fife, Jim Caviezel as Wit, Ben Chaplin as Bell, John Cusack as John Gaff, Woody Harrelson as Keck, Elias Koteas as Staros, Jared Leto as White, um, Nick Nolte as Tall, Lieutenant Gordon Tall, John C. Riley as Storm, John Savage as Macron, John Travolta. So yeah, really good cast. Even Nick Stahl in a small role, and Thomas Jane. He also has a very brief moment in the film as well. I would say when it comes to the cast, I would say definitely Jim Caviezel is the one who is in a lot of ways kind of the main character and kind of the main focus of the movie. And this is easily one of his best performances. It really did a good job making you relate to him and really connect with him. I would say him and Sean Penn's characters, and honestly Elias Koteas, those three are the three characters that I connected with the most. And I feel the script did give them a lot to work with compared to some of these other actors who kind of had a little more limitations. But here, yeah, you really do feel for these characters. You bond with them. You want them to succeed. You want them to succeed. And the performances are really quite something special. I mean, this is definitely some of Sean Penn's best work. I wouldn't necessarily say it's his best performance in a war movie. I know some people would feel that that's the case, but I think his performance in Casualties of War, for instance, was a step up. But this was still a good performance, good, steady, strong performance from Sean Penn playing a disillusioned sergeant in this war that just seems like it's never ending. Uh, John Cusack, I would say for the little bit that he was in, he did a good job, but he's not in it a lot, and he doesn't really have a lot of dialogue, but does a decent enough job for the little bit of screen time that he has. Woody Harrelson was great. Honestly, almost stole the show as Sergeant Keck. His death scene is definitely something that really does stick with you. And Elias Koteas, I would say he was the biggest surprise for me when it comes to this cast because Elias Koteas is it's Casey Jones from Ninja Turtles. You know that's what I remember him from, and to see him in a big, serious war movie like this really did showcase how talented of an actor he truly was. He held his own and didn't really shrink on screen or feel like he was below any of these other more well-known actors. So yeah, I got to give Elias Koteas a ton of credit. I thought it was a very genuine, very impressive performance. I thought he was just really good. He was great. And Nick Nolte was gruff as always, but just boisterous and loud and compelling. Very compelling performance by Nick Nolte. You could just sense the desperation of this character in every line of dialogue, and you really got why he was willing to risk so much because this was his opportunity. This was his chance. This was his moment to get his place in history, and he wasn't going to let it slip away, even if it meant that it was going to cost a lot of men their lives. Uh, John Savage, I want to mention him too. He plays Jack Macron, this soldier who's not dealing with the war that well. You could tell that he's not mentally all there. And it was nice to see that kind of perspective in a war movie because you don't see that as much. And John Savage really did a good job making this character feel authentic as if he really was not all there. John Travolta, he's in it for a very quick little cameo as Brigadier General Howard Quintard and the two scenes that he shares with Nick Nolte are really, really good stuff. John C. Riley was solid too as Storm. I want to mention Dash Mihawk as Don Dole. I thought he did a good job with his scenes too. George Clooney's in this as a captain who has like a scene at the end of the movie. He basically replaces Nick Nolte's character. Or no, he replaces James Staros. He replaces Koteas because Tall thinks that Koteas is too soft, and so replaces him with someone else. And I guess the only other, like, Ben Chaplin plays Jack Bell, who's another character that has a lot of screen time. But I didn't really, out of all of the performers, I would say his is the one that stood out to me the least. And I think it's not necessarily entirely his fault. I think it's the fact that he looks too similar to Jim Caviezel. And throughout a lot of the film, they're covered in like dirt. And so it's kind of hard to necessarily differentiate the two. It doesn't help either that it seems like they have very similar backstories. So it just becomes hard to follow. And I just, I kept thinking that that character was the same character that Jim Caviezel was playing. And so it just kind of ran together for me. So I think that's really more of a casting director problem than it is really a actor issue or an acting problem. Now, when it comes to other elements of the film, it's equally as impressive as the cast or the direction. I mean, the cinematography by John Toll is terrific. It really is. There's just some absolutely just breathtaking and just gorgeous shots in this. And Toll, he, in a lot of ways, is a very meticulous guy, just like Malick. And that can be kind of a pain for people on the set of a film like this. But it pays off brilliantly because what you have here is just some absolutely just stunning cinematography, and the visuals are just something straight out of an art gallery. The editing by Billy Weber, Leslie Jones, and Sar Klein. I mean, during the war scenes, it was very tight. It was very taut. I would say, for the most part, the editing is pretty excellent. I don't blame the editors for the film's pacing or its issues with the narrative and how it flows from one scene to the next. That's not really an editing issue. That's more of a writer problem. So the editing, it's good. The music by Hans Zimmer, just stupendous. Some of his best and finest work. In a lot of ways, his score is the heart and the soul of this movie. I don't think this film would be as effective when it comes to its scenes of drama in particular without Hans Zimmer's score. This score is beautiful in its own right and deeply tragic in another. Just a really poignant and powerful score by Hans Zimmer. And for a movie that has a budget of like $52 million dollars, it definitely is on the screen. It's not a film where it feels like it's cheap or they're cutting corners. Not the case at all. And really, it's just one of those movies where I think you have a great film here if it just got out of its own way. It provides obstacles that prevent it from greatness, or landmines that are easily avoided, or things that don't really need to be there. I don't think it needed to be as pontificating as it ultimately was, or as pretentious as it is. I don't think it really adds anything of genuine weight or real merit to the story or to these characters. So cut all of that fluff out and you'll still have subtext, you'll still have themes about man versus nature and the various different horrors of war and the different layers of war, both good and bad. You can have all of that and you could have a much more cohesive, consistent, and more compelling film and narrative if you just trimmed out all of this unnecessary fluff. But that's just me. That's just me personally. I know a lot of people do not agree with that at all. They think this extra stuff is what makes this film so much better than a lot of other war films out there. And to me, it's one of those things where it really is just up to your perspective. It's up to your interpretation, just like a lot of the themes in this film. And if it works for you, cool. But it didn't. It didn't work for me in the same way. I just felt that it was distracting from the true strengths of the film, which are the strongest characters, the war itself, the battle for the island, and just the whole journey that the film presents. I feel that is the strength of the thin red line. It's not the subtext. It's not the philosophy. It's not the deep thoughts. It's that. It's all of those things. And I feel the focus on subtext, the jarring focus on it, it detracts away from the real strength of the film. But anyway, that's just my thoughts and my review of the Thin Red Line. And until next time, I'll see you later.